Why does my 350 look like this? Would this kid have made this triple? And more, all in today's video, sponsored by Fine Tune Suspension. And we are at the best place with the best chocolate cake you've ever seen, Pax Tracks in Bunnell, Florida. This one is good because on top of an amazing track and an amazing ride, we ride into the rain. Finally, some Florida rain. All the Florida locals are gonna call out that it rains every day, but you go down for a week and you're like, bro, it hasn't rained once. Well, hey, we got our little sprinkle in. But we're not here to just go through the little ins and outs of this video. I wanna talk to you on a bigger scale. Why does the 350 look like that? What are we doing in this video? Things of this nature. So, first off, this is not going to be the best riding you've ever seen from me, but there is a reason for that. Why would I not ride as good as I can possibly ride? Well, because I've found that if I train and ride at just a little bit under what like my max potential is, I'm actually building a lot more than if I go out there and just try to moto down. If I go out and ride at like 80%, I can learn some of these things at a slower pace, make sure I'm doing them correctly, and then apply them when it comes to racing without even having to try. So, for example, riding with my elbows up. It's something that I practice on my mountain bike. On my mountain bike, yes. On my mountain bike, I practice riding just with my elbows up and with my back in, a good straight position. Then when I get over to my moto, or onto my dirt bike, I should say, I'm not in the UK, I'm not calling it a moto, it's a dirt bike. When I get onto the bike, that just makes it natural. I'm already used to that. So when I get into riding, it's just natural for me to have my elbows up. But when I'm racing, I get like caught in my old ways, and my elbows just kind of sometimes drop because I'm in the moment and I'm trying to race. So when I'm practicing, I like to make sure that, if I'm going to go at a little bit slower pace, I do it and practice my fundamentals like elbows up, looking ahead, steady throttle, trying to roll my corners, things like that to help improve myself so that when I do go racing, I naturally do these things and I can do them at a faster pace. Because there's nothing like learning something and then trying to apply it at the fast pace and it either being wrong or just not showing through like you thought it would. So in this video, you're gonna see me kind of putts in some corners, doing some stuff that you're like, bro, why aren't you ripping? Like, one, I'm not a pro. I'm just a regular Joe who's been doing it 23 years and I've gotten good enough to go faster than I used to go when I was in C class. And I want to learn some things, I want to improve on my riding, and I know you guys do too. So hopefully little things like that you can take away and be like, oh, maybe I won't go out there and just try to sprint the whole time, and try to work on some things, get better. If it's just one thing, then hey, it's just one thing. But if you improve on it at a slow speed and then you notice in a race that, or somebody says like, hey bro, your corner speed's been really good lately, you can be like, I've been working on it. I also want to note that while it does look like I'm out here by myself, which for the most part I am, this was a public day, but I rode later into the day than what most people did. And one thing that I found, and I would say this goes for the younger kids, is that when I was your age, 4 or 5 practices in, there'd be one practice left in the day, and I would skip it. Be like, nah, track's rough, I'm shot, I'm out. I'd skip it. Plus, I wasn't paying, so it didn't matter, right? Dad's money, he was gonna pay for the practice, whatever. So, but now I have found that that was the wrong move all along. I should have skipped first practice, because first practice does nothing for you, where last practice does everything because it is rough. And so for me, riding the last practice and riding late into the day has been even more beneficial for me. So that's also a part of why I'm riding a little bit slower, is because I don't want to cause a crash trying to sprint in some really rough conditions, but I want to learn how to ride properly in the rough conditions so that late in the moto, I'm riding at that same ability as I was at the beginning of the moto, And throwing whips like that at the beginning of the moto and the end of the moto is really what makes a player, you know what I'm saying? Because there's nothing like coming out swinging and then straight airing at the end of the motos. We've all done it. I do it all the time. But if I can learn at an 80% pace in a rough track at the end of the day and get time to myself, that is what I find most beneficial for me. And so that's why in this video you see me just riding around by myself doing my thing, is I'm out there and nobody else was. You'll see there's a couple guys here and there, so we're not completely by ourselves, but getting the track to yourself is pretty sick. And that is one thing that I actually like. I don't love to be around other guys while I'm practicing, especially like some fundamentals and corner speed and things like that, because I get caught up trying to go the same speed as the dude ahead of me, or like I get caught up trying to go the speed of the guy ahead of me, or if a guy that I battle with while I'm racing passes me, then I'm trying to latch onto him and do things that, you know, I just immediately go into race mode. And so for me, if I'm by myself, that really helps me just focus on my own riding and do my own things, you know? And so I'm assuming there's probably homeboys out there like you guys that are like, yeah, bro, that's me too. I like to do a little bit of my own stuff so I can learn and get better before I go apply it to racing. But with that said, so enough about me and the practice. You guys are wondering, what's up with the 350? A little bit of a backstory. I did a top end after the summer, and it was before I went on this Florida trip. I knew I was going to have 4 or 5 ride days. I didn't want to have a top end with 65 hours while I was down there. I'm like, I'll get it done now before spring, right before these, we'll go break it in and we'll be money for the summer, right? Things didn't go that way. I did my first oil change after the top end and found a lot of gold flakes in my oil, like a lot. And I didn't know what to do. I talked to 3-4 people on end for a long time debating what to do. I pulled the engine apart, I put it back together, I changed the oil 6 times, you know, I didn't know what to do. I test rode it. But I was only a few weeks out of this Florida trip. I didn't have time to buy a new bike. I didn't have the money to buy a new bike. I didn't have the time to fix it and get it rebuilt or do anything like that. And so I ended up just sending. I was like, I'm going to play it easy. I'm going to go to an easy track, which I went to Moto Bros Punta Gorda, rode there, felt it out, was like, I'll, you know, hit some of their bigger jumps before I come to a track like Pax where they got this big booter, and tried to feel it out. And while I was still getting flakes in it, they were less than what they were at the beginning, but they were still there. And so I really was having to play it safe, because what we identified the gold flakes were coming from was the crank bearing. And that's not where you want flakes to be coming from. There's only a few places on an engine where that material would come from, and the crank bearing is one of them. More specifically, the crank rod bearing in the middle of your crank. So that was the thing. It wasn't just like change your crank bearings. It was, you either need to buy a new crank or get your crank rebuilt. One of which is $1,000 and the other one is half or less. So given I didn't have the time to pull the motor, get the crank rebuilt, put it back together, and get on this trip, I sent it. Made it happen. We got through the trip safely. This was actually the last ride of the trip, and evidently this was literally the last ride of the day of the last riding day of the trip. So you can see here we make it through safely. Now, quick side note, this kid, he jumps this table. All he had to do was hold on steady throttle and he'd have made this triple. It's a scary triple because the double is close and the triple is pretty big. But steady throttle would have got that little guy over that jump. All he had to do is go. He did the table before, which was 3 times as big as the triple, but it's a triple with a gap in the middle and you get scared. He would have had it though, so remember that. Steady throttle. Next time you're at the track, steady throttle. Now back to the story. So I get home after this trip and I'm still trying to assess the situation. I pull the engine out of the bike, and I found that my cam chain tensioner was stuck in the bike. I put an aftermarket tensioner in that was brass colored. and it was stuck in there. I identified that was my issue. I'm like, this has got to be it. You know, what else could it be? This is, you know, trying to avoid the crank rod bearing because I didn't want to pull the bottom end apart. But I didn't know what to do. I was like, you know what? It's probably this. So I put the OEM chain tensioner back in, put the engine back in the bike, and I went to Texas. And again, I was in a tight time gap between this ride and this video till I went to Texas, and I didn't have enough time to do the exact things that I was talking about before I went down there. So again, I brought a ton of oil and I sent it. And I'll be honest, this ride was good. That ride, it was getting sketchy. There were a couple big jumps that I was like, I do not want to crash, because if I do, that is not going to end well. I am risking my life. Also, shout out to the rain. This is so sick. You getting a lot of rain in here. But yeah, so after the last ride in Texas, I was like, truthfully, I was like, I need to get through this video shoot, which is Why We Ride, JetBoyCo, JetBoy. So go tap into the Why We Ride. I'll put it right here. Super sick. After you hear the end of our story. I did the Why We Ride, and I was like, if I finish the ride out and the bike makes it through safe, then that's it. I'm going to take it home and tear it apart. And we got through the shoot. The video turned out absolutely insane. Was 100% worth it. It wouldn't have been worth it had the bike broken, but it hung on. I was very safe and made sure to be very aware of how that engine was acting. So by the time I got home, I was like, you know, I am not risking it all summer. I was already feeling like it was underpowered, and so what did I do? I pulled the engine out, tore it all the way down, and I brought it to fine-tune suspension to have them pull the bottom end apart, get the crank rebuilt. And on these KTMs, you have to shim the crank out, so it's no longer just crank bearings and throw the crank back in. You have to put it back together, shim it, make sure it's perfect, and then start rebuilding it. And so I took it apart, brought it to fine tune, and then those guys called me and said, hey, we pulled the crank, that's sent off. We're going through your crank bearings and your transmission bearings, and there's a couple rough ones in here. And I'm like, all right, well, we definitely need to do those. There would be nothing worse than putting it all back together and having a crank bearing or a transmission bearing go out. So we had that repaired, got it done, and that is off. And now we are going to pull off the track here and watch as I get back to the van. It starts pouring. But yeah, so that bike is sitting there with no engine, waiting for it to be rebuilt. If you've been wondering why we aren't at the track, it's because we've got no bike. But not for long. We are working on some cool things, and there is a bike that you can't see that we have. That's bike build number 2. So if you follow along with JetBoyCo, you would have seen the mentions of number 2. That's on the way. Thanks for watching this Dirt Bike Lifestyle video at Pax Tracks. Give those guys a follow on Instagram. Follow JetBoyCo on Instagram. And if you liked this, there's definitely more where this came from. Subscribe, like. We'll see you guys in the next Dirt Bike Lifestyle video. Peace out, homeboys.
Just started coming down like right when you got off.
Oh, holy shit.